Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you're tuning in from around the world. My name is Jose Borghino. I'm the Secretary General of the International Publishers Association, and I'm very, very pleased to welcome you all to this exciting Zoom seminar, Digital Publishing, Business Models and Protection, as part of the Jakarta Content Week, or JACTENT program. This panel is brought to you by the International Publishers Association, and I should also mention the sponsors: Telkomsel's Next Dev Summit 2020, the German Federal Foreign Office, the Goethe Institute and HP, as well as the Frankfurter Buchmesse and Yayasan 17,000 Pulau Imaji. Sorry for my pronunciation. Today we're going to talk about digital publishing. We all know that the COVID pandemic has accelerated the production, dissemination, and take-up of digital content around the world. For example, in the US market at the end of July, there was a bounce back after the market dive in March and April, so that paperback sales were up 1.4% compared to 2019. Hardcover sales were up 5.1%, and board books for children were up by 13.8%. That sounds pretty impressive, but just look at the figures for downloaded audio and ebooks, and we see a whopping great leap of 25% in sales compared with last year. But what does digital publishing actually mean? STM publishers have been virtually completely digital for decades. Education publishers are still working in a hybrid environment because teachers and increasingly students prefer hard copy in certain situations. And trade publishers are adapting their workflows to the reality that they can produce their content in a much wider array of formats. But there are still grave concerns. Many publishers, especially in developing countries, are wary about digital publishing because they fear loss of control of their content and because they apprehend rampant piracy if they go down that route. Today, we will examine new digital models in business, in global publishing. Sometimes these new models have evolved organically from traditional publishing practices. Sometimes they have arisen in other creative sectors like music or TV and then jumped across into publishing. We will discuss the opportunities, but we will also look at ways of diminishing the threats, including piracy. I will introduce each of our four speakers, who will then speak for around 5 minutes each about this topic. We will then have a general discussion before opening up to questions from the audience. Please use the chat function at the bottom of your screen to ask a question. I will try to direct it to a speaker or the whole panel. So let's start. First off, we have Steph Duncan, who is a digital publishing consultant who's spent over 20 years developing and implementing Bloomsbury Publishing's digital strategy. This included building and managing its first consumer-facing websites, including the first official Harry Potter website, to grow fan communities and enable direct sales in both print and digital. At Bloomsbury, she also developed and managed its metadata and content databases, ebook and digital audio production, sales and distribution programs, as well as an online public library service and a digital-first publishing list. She currently consults to both trade and academic publishers and others on digital publishing globally. Over to you, Steph.
Thank you so much, Jose, and thank you all for inviting me here. It's very exciting to be part of this inaugural event. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you. For my 5 minutes, I'm going to focus primarily on the trade area of publishing and ebooks, with a focus particularly on the concerns around piracy. So I would start by saying that in the first instance, the typical way to combat piracy is seen as DRM, digital rights management, and that is typically applied by the retailer. So there applies DRM both to protect the publisher's content but it's also effectively locking customers into their own ecosystem, which is beneficial to them as well. So it's seen as a kind of win-win to publisher and retailer. On the other hand, consumers don't tend to love DRM because they feel locked in, they can't easily share or use their books that they feel they've bought in the way that they would like to. So what emerged from that was what's commonly known as social DRM, or watermarking is another form of social DRM. That is where the ebook is easily shared, but there is a mark on the ebook that might stop a consumer from sharing it. So for example, they might put the consumer's email address onto the ebook. And most people won't want their email address shared, so that will stop casual piracy. I would also say casual piracy is not the norm. I mean, if people do want to pirate books, they will strip off whatever DRM you put on there. But most consumers don't want to get involved in piracy. They actually just want to buy the book and read it. And if the book is commercially priced, they really have no need to steal it. And most people are wary of taking pirated editions because it can often introduce viruses into their systems. So those are methods of enabling the consumer to have a better experience by applying these more consumer-friendly styles of DRM, social or watermarking. And indeed, watermarking is the norm now in Europe, certainly. And it's also becoming more widely used when publishers sell direct to the consumer. So we've spoken briefly about the fact that when selling using a retailer, the retailer will apply the DRM. When a publisher sells direct to the consumer, they could either apply their own DRM to the ebook, or they may choose to simply apply a social DRM, which is somewhat friendlier. You can also personalize the content to your customer. And I think we would all agree that building relationships direct with our consumers is becoming an increasingly important aspect of book publishing. I think the other thing to look at in terms of access models is subscription models. So that completely comes away from the ownership involved in buying an ebook. Instead, it's access to an ebook. And we've seen this across other industries, music and film, the rise of Netflix and Spotify and so on. Whilst ebooks may not achieve that same level of subscription model adoption, it is an important thing to look at. And certainly for publishers with deep backlists who are concerned about the possible cannibalization of their front list by putting a new book into a subscription service, what publishers are often doing is looking at putting their deep backlist into subscription services, because what that does is it brings the content forward to a new readership. Many people who opt into subscription services often don't even buy ebooks. So it's accessing a new market, it's making older books visible again, and it's increasing your sales in that way. I think if you look at something like Disney Plus, that's a really interesting example. So that's where the company controls so much of the content of any particular area. And this can apply in publishing too. If you have the absolute list of all books on a given subject, that's a prime area for looking at a subscription platform, because really what the consumer wants is they want to be able to get all books on that subject, in one place. And this is often what stops consumers from going to a subscription service that doesn't include all publishers' works. But if you take the Disney Plus example, you see that where someone has a complete set of content, it's a very appealing offer to the public. And that was my alarm telling me I've spoken for 5 minutes, so I'll stop now, but happy to take questions later.
Okay, I'll just unmute. Thank you, Steph. That was really useful. We'll get back to you with some questions after we hear from some of the other speakers. We're now going to switch to a slightly different business model by talking to Michael Harriman. He started his career as a computer magazine editor and proceeded to handle one of Southeast Asia's biggest online tech communities of its time. He continued his editorial journey by co-founding Independent Reviews Media before taking a career turn in the development world. He started joining Compass Gramedia first as the tech lead in Gramedia's educational startup before becoming the chief technical officer of Gramedia Digital. Over to you, Michael.
Okay, thank you, Jose, for the lovely introduction. Okay, for my 5 minutes, I want to share a short journey about how Gramedia journey in the digital publishing. So when in Indonesia, when people hears about Gramedia or Kompas Gramedia, the top of mind is always books and newspaper, because Gramedia started its business from publishing and then went to bookstores. But then the market shifted. We all know that, and with the shifting of the market, we have a burden how to stay relevant with the market. So one of the things that we started is bringing the published book into the digital world. So we create a platform where our publisher can serve their customer easily, legally, and as affordable as possible to reach their customer all at the same time. Because this is actually one of a problem that we face. As you know, Indonesia is an archipelago, so we have three different time zones spread by ocean. So when we publish a newspaper, let's say newspaper in Jakarta, it will be in the customer's hand in, let's say, Papua or Eastern Indonesia by noon. It was yesterday's news written last night and then printed and served to the customer the next day. I don't think the news will be quite relevant by that time, right? So that's why the market share is limited by the websites and the news portal. So with this solution, the platform, we can serve the paper all at the same time at 6 o'clock in the morning, all over Indonesia and even abroad. So actually, we bring the new customer, we reach new customer at home and abroad at the same time. And how we propose the offering. We have 3 different business model for how to reach the customer. One is a single product option, so customer can buy directly the product they want. And for the other one is subscription. We have a couple different subscription model that customer can subscribe on and have access to all the collection within the subscription itself. One of the most popular is we call it premium buffet, because with one subscription they can read all the books which is around 50,000 different books all at once. And the other one is e-library. We call it e-purpose. This model is actually for B2B market. I say it's for school and for institutions that wants their own managed library. With that, they can manage their own library like it was a physical library without the hassle, without the having to manage space and books and maintain it, but directly can have have a digital library directly to the palms of their consumer, their members easily, and of course it's much cheaper than maintaining a whole physical library. But we also face a lot of challenges, especially in the protection and piracy. As we all know that piracy and security is a cat and mouse game, right? So one of the basic things that the first thing that we have to face is for to secure the trust of the publisher, so we can have a long and happy relationship. Okay, and encryption is one of the solution that we put in place on the first place. I think we can talk about that much later. Okay, back to you.
Okay, thanks, Mike. We'll get back to you with any questions. And please, anybody who's online watching this, please use the chat function at the bottom of your screen to ask any questions of individuals or the whole panel. Our next speaker is Sven Fund. He's worked as a publisher for the global publisher Bertelsmann, at the Swiss publisher Birkhauser Verlag, at the STM powerhouse now Springer Nature, and the German academic publisher De Gruyter. In 2015, Sven founded Full Stop with 2 Ps, a consulting and investment agency specializing in scholarly publishing as well as institutions in the educational space. Sven invests and/or manages companies such as Sample of Science, Knowledge Unlatched, or InKit.com. He's a lecturer at Humboldt University in Germany and publishes on open access as well as the digital transformation of the publishing industry. All yours, Sven.
Thank you very much, Jose, for the kind introduction, and good evening, good afternoon, and only to my European colleagues, good morning, especially in Britain. It's my pleasure to speak a little bit about the field of academic publishing. As you can see, we divided the labor a little bit, and Stephanie already mentioned and spoke of access, which is obviously important in end customer businesses. But access is always also the big question in academic publishing, as you can imagine. And I think that's something that I would like to discuss a bit, which is open access. So obviously there is a lot of rights issues around content behind what I would call a paywall. But removing the paywall altogether would be ideal for many publishers if they could just make money off it. So if there is a way to get a return on the investments that a publisher is doing in the editorial, sales and marketing, and all kinds of other spaces. That's what we are doing at Knowledge Unlatched, and there are also other initiatives, so this is not meant to be a marketing blurb. What we are doing there, and I think what we are all doing in the space of open access for books, is trying to find a way how to fund the investments publishers are making and really refund that through the traditional payment channels. So it is not at all a disruptive element, but rather constructive, I would say, regarding the present digital business models. Our way at Knowledge Unlatched is a global crowdfunding, which means that librarians from all over the world pitch in money to buy out a defined list of titles from a variety of publishers. Steph worked with Bloomsbury in the past. They are part of that, for example. So over 100 publishers around the world are basically suggesting titles, and these titles are then being unlatched, not just for the libraries that participate on the funding side, but for everyone. And I can report that on our open research library, which you can see online, the biggest usage by country, by nationality, comes from Indonesia. So it seems to work also for Indonesians in this context. I think open access in that respect is a good way to recoup investments, especially in research monographs. That's where it started. but also, and we discussed that yesterday briefly in preparation for this meeting, for all other sorts of content. So there's also video content, for example, which is available in open access. There are posters from conferences, which I think is really an attractive element to look at. And there's certainly journal articles. So far, working with 650 libraries and more than 100 publishers, we have made 2,000 books open, and we are adding between 400 and 500 every year. And what's next in open access from my perspective is not so much the focus on the rights management side, because that is obviously removed in open access, but the management of the workflow side, because a lot of libraries are completely overcrowded with the complexity of managing open access, as the funders, as the contact partners for researchers, consulting them how to work with this type of content. So we believe that solutions that help researchers to better understand how to publish open access, the advantages, the disadvantages, but also where to obtain funding, whether it's their university, whether it's a traditional research funder, or whether it's corporations like big pharma companies, for example, is something that is coming up from our perspective. We are working in this field as an intermediary because we feel between publishers and libraries, because we feel it is the best positioning to really help both sides to bridge the gap, which is right there for everybody, pretty obvious, and trying to continue collection building on the library side, but also traditional, if you want, content work on the other side in publishing houses, which we find really important, because publishing doesn't have to be disrupted on the curation side. It is a very well-working system, in my view. There are obviously shortcomings, but it's a well-working system. I have some understanding for the fact that some elements of publishing ought to be disrupted from librarians' perspectives, because the price development in these fields is clearly something that is working against them. And so we are trying to bridge that gap and help both sides. Thanks. I'm muted.
I'll unmute before I start speaking. Thank you, Sven. That was great. All right, let's move on. But before I do, I don't see very many questions. I've got one, but it's not to the panel, it's to me. So if you have any questions, please use the chat function at the bottom of your screen and ask a question either to an individual who has spoken or to the full panel. Our last speaker is Joris Sebastian. In 1998, Joris was appointed general manager of the Hard Rock Cafe in Jakarta. So already you can see that we're coming from a different direction now. He created the I Like Monday music concert program and the Destination Nowhere TV program. In 2006, Joris won the British Council's International Young Creative Entrepreneur Award. In 2007, he founded OMG Consulting, a business consultancy helping corporations do their business differently and better. In 2017, with Tio Guritno, apologies for pronunciation, Joris founded Inspigo, which stands for Inspiration on the Go, an audio podcast platform. He has written 9 books about creativity, innovation, and millennials. Over to you, Joris.
Thank you so much, Jose, and great to speak here, especially the other 3 speakers is all on time, 5 minutes, so I also have to be on time, 5 minutes. So yes, I wrote already 9 books, and actually coming from there, 9 books I wrote, I make a lot of impacts locally. I mean, like from my books, from my seminar, workshop, there's a lot of testimonials, but then I was thinking like, I maybe only impacted 200,000 people, while Indonesia, we have 200 million people. There is a time when I meet Tio Guritno, Indonesian millennials who 2 times exit in Silicon Valley. He came back to Indonesia, and then we both start to do podcasts. because those days podcast is not familiar, it's not popular in Indonesia yet. But we think that with podcasts, we can reach more people. I mean, a book is good. I always love to write a book, read physical books, but I need to give this influence to a bigger audience. So we choose podcast is very light on your handphone, bite size. The content we make not like the usual podcast monologue. We create like a radio kind of feeling, and it's a hybrid because for the speakers. We ask them to talk like in the radio, but in the radio you don't have any recordings, not like on the TV when I was interviewed by CNN, the next day you will see it on YouTube. So there's a lot of people asking like, Joris, can I listen again your radio show yesterday? I don't have. So there's the idea. So we create, and it's a hybrid between radio and premium content. So for the most of our speakers, they just use our podcast like they're talking in the radio, so it's free for everybody. But then once we see they have a lot of listeners, then we create audio playbooks. It's like it's a book, but it's short book, and you can press like, okay, over here you can listen to the podcast, and then the next page you can listen to the YouTube video, short YouTube video, it brings you to the video. So this is the premium content. So for the podcast, it's free. We do have a subscription, but then it's not that high in Indonesia, and we already study like Spotify and everything. The money that distributed to the speakers is very low. So we rather like, okay, this is just PRing. You just do talking. And now we also like, we want to become the PGC platform. PGC is different with UGC, user generated platform. PGC is more to professional generated content. So we think we can curate it. Now we have 750 speakers speaking in our platform, and we can control, let's say one or two making not a good podcast, we can bring it down. Not like in the like UGC platform that, the quality, the quantity wins over quality. With the PGC, we can control the quality. And about the protection, we'd rather do the movement. I agree with Steph that, I've done many DRM kind of thing in the past for music and everything, but then they will find a way. So we are doing more movement. Like if you really want more good quality content, you have to pay for a good content. We are also one of a few company in Indonesia that's still doing the workshop or seminar with pay. There's a lot of free seminar nowadays in Indonesia because of the pandemic, but we still, not for the money, but for the education that you have to pay for a good quality content. And last but not least, why we are still exist, because we are doing the B2B in the beginning, B2B model, and then now we are introducing the B2B2C. This is even like something that we think that we cannot be like China. We have a big population like China, but we don't have the money like people in China because of their one children policy. So we do B2B2C. It's like company to company, but the content, it's not about branded content. The content is something for the user. So now we are managing to get a lot of companies willing to make a content for the customer. So the company is the one who pay, but it's not a branded content. This is something new. So I think something new is about PGC and also about B2B2C. That's my 5 minutes. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much, Joris, and thank you to all. The only question I've got, I'll answer very quickly. It's from someone called Galianindita, or Cecilia asked, does the IPA have book industry, publishing industry in the Asia Pacific especially? And what do you think? No, we don't. We're an umbrella organization for publishers associations all over the world, including IKAPI in Indonesia and a number of other countries in the Southeast Asian region. So that's who we are. Please send me some questions so I can ask these 4 great speakers about it. Before and hopefully they all flood in. Before I go to the chat function, I thought that what we needed to do was just have a quick chat amongst ourselves. You've heard everybody else. It seems to me that it's the same old story, that journalists want to create this as some kind of existential battle between one kind of media and another kind of media. But the same old story crops up again. Radio didn't kill newspapers, TV didn't kill radio, and now digital is coming in. Journalists would like to see this as the death of the book, the death of everything else. But what we're seeing, from what I can hear from all of you today, is that it's much more complicated, much more complex, and I would say much more exciting, because people are bringing together different media, different ways of producing, managing, and disseminating content, and different people around the world are consuming that content how they want, when they want, and in the format that's easiest and most convenient for them. Any comments? Can I start back with Steph, please?
Yeah, Jose, you're absolutely right. I think we've entered an age where actually the control has moved more towards the consumer, actually. The consumer is able to make their choice to, and in fact, that's a challenge for publishers, because we need to remain relevant. We need to produce content that the consumer wants, and in a way that the consumer wants to consume it. I think in addition to that, it's worth saying that what digital has brought to the consumer is an ability to become a publisher themselves. I mean, we haven't really touched on UGC, and you know, we touched a little bit on it, but of course, you know, self-publishing is a huge industry now. I know Kobo, which is owned by Rakuten in Japan, I mean, they have publicly stated that a quarter of their sales, book sales, are made by their user-generated content, their Kobo Writing Life platform. I mean, I find that absolutely fascinating. In other words, you know, consumers are both producing and consuming, and publishers need to react to that. And we need to be willing to take risks. We need to make sure that our content is available in the places that people want to access that material. And I think if anything, publishers should stop being afraid. I know that there's a fear always of loss of revenue, but in fact seize these as opportunities, because they truly are. I'm sure others want to speak on that point, so I'll leave it there, but by all means ask questions on that if you like.
Okay. Anybody else want to jump in from the panel, please?
I agree with Steph. Like, I mean, like now it's moving to the consumers, and that's why we are trying to build and promote PGC, because like in the future, we are planning to make this, like now we have 750, and in the future, maybe we have 5,000 professional generated content that we take from the consumers, and then they can make their book, even a physical book. But now they know how many people who like their talks. So it's a good landing, because now there's a lot of publisher also like don't want to give a chance to the new writers. So I have a writer class, but it's not easy to get a publishing deal now, because they also have to make sure that people will buy the printed edition. And in Indonesia, because like I see it like the money that we got from digital is not that high yet. That's why people also still like maybe making money from seminar or workshop. And for me, I have 9 books. It's all in physical, but I try to make it experience. Like this one, you can put stickers on the cover. This one, you can color it back in 2010, so long before the adult coloring. So physical book for me is very good, but it's become like experience. But for the knowledge, yeah, we have to go digital, because like in Inspigo, Inspiration and on the Go, we give a lot of knowledge, bite size, anytime, anywhere.
Okay, very interesting. Mike, in terms of Gramedia's strategy, there were fears a number of years ago when the digital revolution hit newspapers that companies like the New York Times would actually disappear. They've changed that. They've turned that around using platforms and using the quality argument, if you like. Is that something that has inspired Gramedia's digital strategy?
Well, I remember when the time that me and my colleague is talk about one book that called "The World is Flat." I think we all heard of it, which started the whole revolution. And yeah, for a little while that we have a fear of the end of the world is coming. But I think the world is keep on turning, so everything must go on. And while the market is getting saturated, but everyone will have a chunk of its cookie, right? Radio is not killed by television. So is the newspaper, the magazine, and all the radio. I think podcast is nice. I have podcast also, and now Yoris is bringing a bite-sized podcast, and I think that's wonderful because attention span is very small. But I think the one thing that I got silver lining on this is the cheaper the better. That's for the consumer, but I think we have also have a constraint in producing a quality content. That's another question for us. Another thing that maybe I like to throw something also, okay, that I was asked on the other day one simple question: how would you, as a content producer, as a content owner, be able to compete your screen time, your user screen time, with the other more exciting, complicated, exciting product? Like, let's just say it's the same. Like, we have to compete with Spotify, Netflix, even bite-sized content like TikTok. We have to compete at the same screen with them. I think that's a simple yet hard to answer question, and it's being a basic question for our survival, if you must.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that the discussion is in journalism as well, is around the seeming demise of long form journalism and investigative journalism, because people are reading in a different way these days. There's an indication that people's attention spans are being diminished, but there's also the counter to that, where people realize that it's a problem and actually search out for long form journalism. And Sven, your content is kind of the opposite of the bite-size, quick read. Academic publishing is all about the research, the journey, the long form knowledge, if you like. Can you see that that STM publishing or open access publishing is being affected by people's attention spans, or do you think it's still strong?
No, I think it's. I think what basically all three of you said is very true for academic publishing as well. It comes a little bit from a different angle. I think research publications are all about generating impact and attention, and not so much generating revenues. So very few researchers write an article or a book to make money on it, but most of them do because they need to have they feel the need to basically distribute the knowledge that they have generated in one way or the other. So I think in that respect, open access is more easily being done in research publishing because the commercial element is, at least for the researcher, for the author, is falling away. That's not true for the publisher necessarily. But also, if you look into other fields, if you look at The Guardian, for example, how it's being funded, that is basically a funding model which is closer to open access than anything else I can see in the newspaper world. So you can reliably trust that you can read every article and then you are free to make a donation, support the newspaper or not. So I think it's possible to do that in all fields. It is really a matter of the funding structure, the commercial structure behind content. And yes, there is certainly a very strong trend in research publishing as well. The big research funders of the world, the Max Planck Society or the Wellcome Trust, National Institutes of Health, whoever, have a very strong demand to also show the general public, who is funding them with taxpayers' money, to show them that what they are doing is meaningful, important, and impactful. So there are a lot of publishers who offer translations, if you want, of a research article, which none of us would understand, just probably 500 people in the world would, into layman language. In that respect, it is not necessarily shorter in number of pages, but quicker to digest and better to build into your world, like beyond being a researcher in virology and understanding all the ins and outs of COVID or whatever.
Okay, very interesting. Okay, I've got some questions here. One for Joris and Steph. It's about book contents and shifting to consumer-centric. So the question is, when book content shifts to consumer-centric models, will the quality of the book content shift? What about books that have won world-class awards, such as the Booker Prize or the National Book Prize? Are we seeing those prizes coming out of the consumer-centric trend or not?
Well, if I can start on that, I would firstly say that I think we need to stop being snobby about prizes, actually, because, and in fact, concentrate on bestsellers. Let me just name 3 that I'm sure you've all heard of, if not read. I mean, obviously, there's 50 Shades of Grey, love it or hate it. I mean, that was a self-published series that went on to global success and millions and probably billions of dollars in not only the book, but movie sales. The Wool series by Hugh Howey also started as self-published. And finally, The Martian by Andy Weir, you know, which if you haven't read the book, you've probably seen the film with Matt Damon. So those are just 3 examples of books that started as self-published books that went on to massive global success in sales terms. And as for the prizes question, I don't doubt that there will soon be a self-published, if you like, book on the prize list. I think it's interesting that firstly, self-published authors are already appearing on New York Times bestseller lists already, as there's, you know, without having been picked up by a publisher, as their own self-published entity. And I think it's interesting to note that prizes are increasingly moving to choosing books from small independent publishers. I think the last Booker Prize had something like 4 books from small indies. You know, so I think we need to stop thinking that the big publishers are the curators of everything that is good. As people are able to, you know, a self-published author can now hire their own editor, can now hire their own book jacket designer. You know, all these services are available online, and people are using them and making really high-quality books through the user-generated content line.
Thanks, Steph. That question was directed to you as well, Joris. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, totally agree with Steph, and I'm adding to another example, like from Netflix, when they created House of Cards, originally from UK. You know, they see the data, who's the character, Kevin Spacey, and the other data for the director. So using this data, customer centricity, it still can create a good quality of content. So that's the key for the future of digital publishing. I see seeing the data, but still delivering good quality original content. So I don't think it's going to be like because of this customer centricity is going to make the book quality going down.
Okay, thank you. There's another question here that's for everybody. It's a question about protection. And it says, since Indonesia is a tight community, which is an interesting concept given there's 200 million people, with a huge sense of sharing, sometimes we see a lot of pirated newspaper, books, and even magazines going around in the chat app. And this will disadvantage not just the publisher, but also the authors, unless it is made open sourced. Is there a way to make people realize the copyright and support, realize or respect the copyright and support the content creator? This goes to the idea of promoting buying content rather than stealing it. It's a Hearts and Mind campaign that a number of countries have tried. Mike, from Gramedia's point of view, do you think that that's such a campaign, if it was launched by the government at any level, would be successful?
I don't know about successful, but it is very much needed, because one of the things that we have to study is to bring value, not just the writer that bring value to the consumer, but the consumer also bring I don't want to say reward, but something in return for the value that they are given. So the writer have incentive to go on to bring more, like yours, to bring more books to the public, because the response is good, and also the curate, like you were saying, that curate good content, we need to spend a little bit more, right? But the balance is, I know that there is a balance on that. But also, we are with Gramedia, we also try to do education for the market. But I don't think that is enough. We have to do that like continuously. And I agree with Pep said earlier, one of the most effective solution is try to put to have a better pricing to discourage the piracy. They don't have incentive to do something that is getting harder and harder.
Okay. I mean, one of the things that comes out of this kind of discussion is the clash of business models, if you like. Publishers, creators have always, or until now, started the process by creating something and putting it out into a market where they have protection through copyright. Most countries in the world now are signatories to the Berne Convention, which protects copyright. But the threat to copyright is not coming from countries like Iran that have not signed the Berne Convention. The threat is from the biggest companies that have ever existed on this planet, and we know who they are. And they are attacking and undermining, or seeking to undermine, copyright, because their business model depends on getting free content, showing it on a screen or in other ways, and getting advertisers to subsidize that process. So does anybody want to jump in now and talk about that clash of business models and where you think we might end up?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that, Jose, if I may, because I think it's a little bit short-sighted to argue that way. You're absolutely right that there are these big companies who are more than free riders, probably rather initiating the process of not paying for content that you use. But in the end, it's the consumer consuming it, right? It is not Google consuming it, but it is consumers, and they are aware that creating content costs money. I think nobody is that kind of remote of the world that they don't understand that writing this means an effort, and in that respect, money. And I think I completely agree with Michael. I think if we take the thresholds, and I think Steph mentioned that as well, if we take the thresholds of to content as much as we can down to really reduce the I mean, nobody wants to violate, most people don't want to violate rules and laws where they know that they are in the end like detrimental to their own cause, which is more content of the same, right? I mean, if you see, for example, in Germany, the situation around Project Deal, which is a buying consortium of all universities with big publishers. One big publisher, in fact, the biggest publisher, hasn't come to a deal over the last 2 years. They have blocked content to all libraries, which means that everybody is now using Sci-Hub and all other kind of illegal sources for that content. Now, that is not in anybody's interest, I think. Yet you can see that consumers are finding their way, and it's probably not the best. It's not very helpful that somebody says either you play according to my rules or I'm blocking it, because that's the opposite of taking thresholds down. It's putting thresholds up. And I think those times that were so supply-centric are over for publishing. I think we need to find better ways in that respect.
Okay. Anybody
Yeah,
else?
and sorry, Jose, if I could just add to what Sven just said, from a trade perspective, I mean, I think a very famous example of this is the Harry Potter books, actually, which for quite a while were not available digitally, you know, after the digital revolution started really in 2007. And they were widely pirated until they became available legally, and then they stopped being pirated. And now, you know, huge, you know, revenue is being generated through those digital products. And I think that says it all, really.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, the difference between the way that, say, newspaper media responded to the digital revolution and the way that trade and other publishers responded is really interesting. The newspapers kind of rolled over and gave everything away for free very quickly, whereas publishers held on to those assets, kept the value of those assets up, and as you say, at a certain time released them at a price point that made everybody some cash. Now, the interesting thing to me is that there are some models like Spotify where, as Sven said, the price is very consumer-centric, but the creators get zero or almost zero. Let's call it zilch. Joris, you were talking about the difference between UGC and UGC. Do you see that divide as providing a model for the future of maintaining quality as well as return for creators?
Yeah, because like we study not only in like America, Europe, but even China. China is very close to Indonesia, big population. But when we using the UGC format for Inspigo, for instance, we will working so hard to create that quantity. And then we already seen like many examples, because Theo also working for Pandora before. So he knows that actually most of the musicians got a very small amount of money from that. And then those who will benefit is the one who is very popular, not necessarily very good quality. So we are trying, we are also not saying that this is the right model, but we're trying to do this professional generated content. We curated the speakers, mostly is book authors, and then we create this content, and then we call it, we try to give them meat, you know, so we don't give them like small money, we try to give them meat. So slowly build up, and then we like Indonesia, for example, there's a good friend of mine, doctor in the National Hospital in Jakarta, say that in Indonesia, there's a lot of baby have that low nutrition, not because of their coming from the rich, from the poor people or low education, because they see it on internet from the wrong source. So they're getting the bad nutrition or the foundation for the baby, not because of their poor or because they are low educated, because they see it for free on the internet. So we are coming from that side. We try to give meat to these content creators, but in order to do that, we cannot make it open for the market, UGC. So we try PGC. I cannot say this is the best solution, but at least we try different solutions.
Okay, that's fascinating. Thank you, everybody. We're almost finished. Only a couple of minutes left. So I want to thank our speakers, Steph, Mike, Sven, and Joris. Thank you so much for a really entertaining and useful hour. I want to thank Laura Prinsloo and Claudia Kaiser, who've been working behind the scenes, as well as Nung. Thanks to all of you for joining us out there. Thank you for your questions. I hope I got to most of them. I hope you enjoyed the session and found it very useful. Please continue to attend and participate in the fantastic range of sessions that are brought to you by Jack Tent. I think it's a great program. And I want to put in a commercial right at the end. Don't forget to save the date for the 33rd IPA International Publishers Congress, which will be held in Jakarta on the 11th to the 13th of November 2022. It seems like a long way away, but it's not. It will happen almost immediately. And I've put out a call to the governor, Anies, to see if we can get rid of all pirated content on the streets of Jakarta for 2022 for that Congress. See you all. Thank you very much. And I hope you enjoyed this session. Goodbye.
Mengawali hari dengan informasi terkini, menjadi sumber referensi dan inspirasi di setiap aktivitas. Melalui news video portal, segala informasi dapat disajikan cepat, akurat, dan lengkap. Dengan kekuatan teknologi digital, Maidcom.id hadir dengan berita pilihan yang dikemas secara menarik. Maidcom.id, digitally inspire people.
Sudah 15 menit, masih kejebak macet.
Tenang, daripada emosi, 15 menit Anda jadi lebih berharga kalau bersama saya.
15 Minutes, setiap Rabu, jam 6 sore lewat 45 menit. Mediaindonesia.com hadir dengan opini cerdas dan narasumber kredibel, mudah diakses, informasi berkualitas ada di genggaman Anda. Klik di browser Anda, www.mediaindonesia.com. Dan temukan pandangan berbeda, karena fakta bisa sama, sudut pandang boleh beda. Mediaindonesia.com, views and news.
Dalam setiap denyut kota, saya selalu menjadi saksinya. Disiarkan lebih dari 20 televisi jaringan Jawa Pos Group. Jawa Pos TV, paling Indonesia.
Kebebasan pers dan gelombang era digital menghadirkan ribuan bahkan jutaan informasi dan data setiap harinya. Beragam data dan informasi berserak di berbagai tempat seiring dengan perubahan dunia yang bergerak begitu cepat. Media-media baru pun bermunculan, namun kualitas informasi seolah tak lagi menjadi prioritas. Bahkan, tak sedikit yang abai pada etika jurnalisme. Untuk menjawab tantangan itu, Kata Data hadir sejak April 2012 sebagai portal media di bidang ekonomi dan bisnis. Beragam sektor diulas mulai dari finansial, energi, pangan, hingga industri kreatif dan digital. Artikel mendalam dan komprehensif dengan sajian infografik yang menarik menjadi karakter utama dari Kata Data. Kata Data berikhtiar untuk terus menyajikan beragam informasi berkualitas untuk kemajuan negeri dan untuk kepentingan bisnis Anda. Kami percaya demokrasi yang sehat tumbuh dari kehadiran informasi dan data yang akurat.
Kalau bicara pakai data.
Hidup terlalu pendek untuk membiarkan pemikiran-pemikiranmu, ide-idemu terdiam begitu saja. Untuk berubah, kita perlu melangkah. Dan langkah itu lahir dari sebuah inspirasi. Republika, start moving.
Wah, ini aku juga mau. Wajahku berminyak.
Padahal
udah pakai make up.
Touch-up sekejap.
Purbasari Oil Control Matte Powder dengan oil control, whitening, dan UV filter.
Wajah berminyak.
Gak lagi. Purbasari Oil Control Matte Powder.